Hello and welcome to the Mississippi Valley Archaeology Center's UWL Archaeology Alumni Podcast. I'm MVAC archaeologist Cindy Kutchuk. Through this podcast series, we're connecting with alumni of the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse Archaeology program. We're getting perspectives on their experiences at UWL, especially their involvement with MVAC, and their path after graduation. And more broadly, we're looking at lessons and life skills that they were able to take forward professionally and in other areas of their lives. Today's guest is Meg Rivers. She attended UWL from 1998 to 2002 and majored in archaeology, earning a BA. She later went on to earn an MA in museum studies, focusing on exhibitions from George Washington University. And she now works at the Smithsonian, which we'll hear more about pretty soon here. So welcome, Meg. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, Cindy. Thanks so much for having me.
So to begin, what led you to UWL's archaeology program?
I'll take us back a little bit. In sixth grade, we were asked what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I was that kid in the class that I wanted to be an archaeologist, specifically an Egyptologist. And I sort of stuck through that through middle school and high school. I think what really helped me was living so close to New York City, having access to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and all those kinds of resources that along with watching PBS, I just saw all of these amazing lands and people investigating not only current day, but in history. So I think just the idea of archaeology and people leaving their material culture behind and we're interpreting that in so many different ways. And it was just this kind of detective story that really intrigued me. And I loved looking at the it could be a very functional piece, but the kind of artistry people put into what they would do with the piece of ceramic or even a toy, and all of these just lives that intersected with this artifact or object. And so when it came time to picking a school, I was looking for archaeology. I wanted to be an archaeologist and luckily found UWL and easily went out there, took a look, saw the MVAC program, and was amazed. So it was an easy pick for me of going there.
And while you attended UWL, in addition to archaeology classes and doing things on campus, were you able to get field experience? Did you take a field school as part of your education?
I did. So I believe it was in Onalaska, I think the Krause site. I had to think back a little bit on that one. And so that was my first field school, going out in the fields with Jim Thieler and just the first day walking the site and getting a lay of the land, if you will, and then just digging a bunch of pits. But it was just really cool. It was bringing things to life. And even if I picked up a bison scapula, I thought someone thought this would be a fantastic little hand shovel. So just going through that process was really amazing. And then the second year I did a field school was out in England, Spurred Historical and Archaeology Research Project. It's about 2 hours north of London. And while they were just digging up the backfill from the previous season, I had an opportunity to explore that site. It went from Iron Age to modern day farming. And then I also got to spend a lot of time in their lab just looking at all the different ceramics. And so I was able to get the the um, the historic perspective within North America, and especially that pre-European contact of Native communities, and then juxtapose that against this continually used land by one particular kind of culture, and then be able to talk with archaeologists from a different country about what that means and some of the processes that are in place in North America versus maybe in Europe.
In addition to the archaeology major, what was your minor as you attended UWL and how did that tie into archaeology?
Did an art minor, and it was really great because I can really tailor my classes to fit around archaeology. And so from there, I really honed in on ceramics, took a few classes, to understand how does one make a piece, hand built and throwing, and just understanding the composition of clay. And so taking that back to what I was learning at MVAC of, okay, well, we have a shell tempered pot. What does that mean? Why is that important? And so it's instead of doing experimental archaeology, it was sort of tailoring my minor classes to fit with what I was wanting to learn through archaeology program, and just applying some of the techniques both directions. It was really great. I also had the opportunity to work study as an assistant director to the art gallery on campus. So that informed a lot of my own learning in terms of how does an art gallery work, the pieces that go on the wall, the selection process. And so when I was doing some work for MVAC, I was able to then parlay some of that knowledge into the opportunities they gave me there. So because of the openness of all of my teachers and professors, they really wanted to tailor something that was quite useful to me. So if I did an independent study with my art minor in terms of drawing or sculpture, they would accept that I would do something that was archaeology based. And so I was able to practice both worlds, and it didn't really feel like a major versus a minor. It just, I got to blend it all together. It was fantastic.
And can you talk more about your work at MVAC and how you wound up being able to bring in that art background and what you were learning with that minor?
I started out as a lab technician, if you will, so sorting through seeds for just felt like hours at a time through the microscope, and cataloging and sifting through bags of material and soil. Had a great time with my friends hanging out doing it, so it was always fun. But when chatting with some of the folks at MVAC and my professors, they realized I did have this interest in illustration as well. Loved to draw as a kid. And they said, well, you could do artifact illustrations. I can. You're going to let me do this. And they would stick potsherds down on the table in front of me, gave me some materials. I had plenty of art supplies from classes. And, just started implementing different stippling processes and going back and forth. There was another student from Japan who was amazing at it. And so we just had this great dialogue back and forth of doing artifact illustration. And I think I probably ran out of potsherds to illustrate that they needed. So at some point, someone took a chance on me and said, well, what if we did a site reconstruction? So I did a color pencil site reconstruction not too far away from La Crosse based on previous field seasons. And it it was amazing. First, I got to sit in the corner at a drafting table all by myself, had my Discman playing with whatever CDs I was listening to at the time, and I just totally zoned out. People were walking down the stairs and probably scaring me because I wasn't paying attention. But I was just hunched over this table and so engrossed in trying to learn what we thought people did then for subsistence practices, the site was very close to the Mississippi River, and so why was that geographic location really important? And so all of these nuances, and I'm sure if you talk to any of the staff members there today that I worked with, they say that Meg probably came up, I don't know how many times a day to ask questions about things. But I will forever remember how the three sisters looked in terms of corn, beans, and squash, because I think I must have asked Connie Arzigian so many questions about, is the leaf structure right? Or is the proportion of the corn stalk, and in terms of the growing season, is this the right time? And where exactly would this be from the river? And to reconstruct something that's two-dimensional using perspective that way was definitely a challenge, but I loved it. It was a wonderful experience. And it was further better because I then was sort of forced, if you will, to speak with different archaeologists for their backgrounds, for their floral, faunal, maybe lithics, what have you. And so I got to sort of delve into all of those particular interest in foci from the people at hand and learn directly from them. And then it was my job to accurately, in a very small way, portray what they were teaching me. And so it was just this, I don't think I would have learned all of that necessarily sitting in a classroom or reading a book.
And part of the capstone, sort of completing the archaeology major, is doing a senior thesis. What did you focus on for that?
I took my opportunity at the Spurred archaeology site. So I always loved England and the UK. I thought, okay, Egyptology is really hot out in Egypt. So maybe that's not my thing. Maybe if I went to climes a little bit further north, it might be a little bit easier on the digging field season. But so what really interested me was this, how ceramics could show a change in societal structure. So looking specifically at one element of Sedgeford where the Romans vacated Britain. And so trying to understand how the Britons that were sort of left behind, they had these years with Roman rule and now this blending of cultures. What happens to the ceramics industry? And so, understanding that this uh, civilization kind of supporting structure has changed dramatically before the Anglos had come in. And so what sort of happens with that material culture? And so taking a look at what pieces were left behind from the Roman era, how where they were in the strata of the site, and then seeing, okay, well, what would one have to do to rebuild this kind of industry? So a very general and high level view of just that change.
After graduating, where did your career path or educational path lead you then?
I took a little bit of time off to go to North Carolina for about a year. And then during that time, I applied to the George Washington University for museum studies. And that was really based off of my experience at MVAC, propelling me that path forward. And so I came to Washington, D.C. and decided to go to UW, not UW, I was already at UW, go to GW, too similar, go to GW and get that master's. And what was really great is that uh, not only did you have to focus in an academic concentration, so I did anthropology naturally, but they also require 2 internships. And so that it just, all these steps sort of lead me to where I have been today.
And what sorts of lessons or skills were you pulling from your undergraduate education as you completed your grad program?
Uh, they were a bit different since I wasn't focusing in the academic world of anthropology or archaeology. But what I think working at MVAC and going to the UW program really taught me was uh, to listen to people. And that is critical for my job now. And so listening to people, hear what they need so that you can foster great relationships and build on a project, if you will. And so being able to take this information and the ability to talk to folks from different kinds of academic and learning backgrounds. And so I think because of my understanding of archaeology and social sciences, it allowed me to understand how scientists work as well. So when I worked at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, I had to intersect with scientists of different degrees, fellows, doctors, curators, interns, what have you. But then I also had to work with other people in social sciences, in the humanities, and then be able to marry all of this and then speak to leadership and donors. And so it's this interpretation that is happening as you're putting a project together that's really critical. And so I think because I was taught those skills and critical thinking at UW, that really helped me through the whole trajectory of grad school and into my career.
How did you wind up getting a position at the Smithsonian, and what path has your career taken as you've gotten into that sort of that institution and network of museums there?
So I'll take us back to the UW times because I think that was the pivotal point of everything. And so when I was at that drafting table and drawing, I was talking to the professors and they said, we've got these display cases which are still on campus. I got to see them recently. Um, James Gallagher said to me, why don't you put together a display? I said, wait, this is a part of archaeology. I can put together images and labels and teach people, and so do this reinterpretation, and that's part of what I'm doing. And I believe also Connie Arzigian added to that of, yeah, there's this whole field of museology. Where do you think museums sort of come from? It's not just curators that create these exhibitions and interpretive places for visitors. And so I just, I'm like, you already let me draw. This is fantastic. But now you're letting me put these things together, and it was all coming together. And so whether I was is exhibit designer or writer or project manager, what have you, but I felt with these moments, these projects they gave me, it sort of solidified, yes, this is what I want to do. I may not be a shovel bum or that kind of material for it, but I can certainly get excited about what someone's working on and make that palatable for the public. So from that and getting the right information about museum studies or museology, I was able to then say, let's look for a grad school program. That led me to GW, and with GW had to do 2 internships. My second internship was at the Natural History Museum. And weird enough, I was also working at Barnes and Noble at the time during grad school, and one of my colleagues at Barnes and Noble also worked part-time at a local synagogue and knew the head of exhibits at Natural History. Got an interview, so I got the internship that way. So, those full-time jobs while you're in school are not always a bad thing, in addition to paying your rent. But yeah, within 2 months of a 3-month internship, they offered me a position at Natural History to do exhibit development and management. And that was 18 years I was there doing that work and working my way up. It's been amazing. The more that you talk to people and get to know folks, you can build that network. Smithsonian's a really great place. It's huge. Even just natural history with its research center spans across the globe. So there's always a lot to learn, relearn, adjust your learning. Science is always changing, for instance. And I had such great opportunities and a wealth of different exhibit projects to work on that had nothing to do with archaeology. So, but that has given me just a wonderful, varied background of which to work from and come in with a fresh perspective. And so now I'm sort of returning back to my roots a little bit. And so now working at the National Museum of the American Indian, I'm able to get back more into the art world a little bit, helping to create art galleries, and then also just working with so many different indigenous people and understanding culture, and then how does that match with art as well. And so I've been really enjoying this change, and it's just really sort of coming back to home for me in terms of my UW roots.
And so taking things more broadly, beyond just professional life, are there any skills that you learned or wish you had learned while you were at UW-La Crosse that have helped you later in life?
To reiterate, the listening skills and critical thinking were absolutely, I use that on the daily. So thank you so much, UW, for that. And I think just looking at the different kinds of skill sets UW is really focusing in on, I didn't have much opportunity for digital savviness back in my day. While digital tools were being used in archaeology, it wasn't a focus. But I have to say my recent visit to UW this year was really great to see the expansion of the program. And so now to see multiple labs with hands-on material, a digital lab, this is so amazing. This really emphasizes that you can do more than just study and do theory and shovel soil all the time or sift lithics. It's much more than that. And so having your hand within archaeology can mean so many different things in the different types of careers that touch it. And so, I mean, you can be an artist, you can be a digital technician, you could be a writer, you could work more in the humanities with it, or you can be more on the science side. There's so many different opportunities with it. It's amazing. And so it's really lovely that MVAC and UW have the support to keep expanding this for students. And so if anything is just take any opportunity you can to be able to really see what's within your wheelhouse. You don't know your wheelhouse until you try it a little bit. So I think those skills in terms of communication are really important, and creating those networks of individuals. Everyone has something to contribute, and knowing that MVAC, part of their mission at the time, and I'm sure it still holds very much so, is building relationships with the communities around. You have this university, the students, whomever going out into a field, there was evidence, some MVAC was called in, and here you have these possible strangers coming in to once ancient land. And so these materials belong to someone at some point. And without those kinds of relationships, not only to Native communities, but other communities in the area as well, being on someone's land and having them trust that, yes, I know there's a history of materials here. Let me call MVAC versus just bulldozing over it. And so those relationships are quite critical as well. And that applies to a lot of different careers down the road.
Yeah, and we still have tours of elementary school groups and older groups coming through the lab, and we appreciate all you've done to help us with your illustrations that we still use in public outreach today and educating people.
That's great. I love the outreach program at MVAC. It's wonderful. And if you don't know, then how are we supposed to help with that? And so it's having that awareness that's so key.
As we near the end of our time together here today, are there any pieces of advice or anything that you would suggest to prospective students who are looking at coming to UWL for archaeology?
The archaeology program was fantastic when I was there way, way back. And to see how it's blossomed over the decades has been amazing. There's so many great opportunities, not only through UW, but having MVAC on site and just there's so much to learn. And you can use these skills and knowledge to then explore other parts of the world. When I was in senior thesis class and where my fellow students went, whether it was to England, to Herculaneum, I think one person went, you're just all over the place. Someone was, I think, yeah, creating their own metals from ore. They were doing experimental archaeology, and just it is amazing how people will find something that really interests them and take that opportunity to go with it. And so, I give the program a chance. It definitely gives you the foundational knowledge and skills, and the the teachers and staff are wonderful where they'll yes and you. If you say you like something, they'll give you that opportunity. They'll find a project for you, and you just can't get that in a book. So there's just so many great opportunities just waiting right there.
Forming connections and seeking out and taking advantage of those opportunities. So very important.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for this interview today and for sharing some of your experiences and your takeaways, Meg.
Thank you.
And thank you as well to our audience. If you're interested in learning more about archaeology, especially in the Upper Midwest, and MVAC's work, you can dig into the resources at MVAC's website at uwlax.edu/MVAC. We have an extra little bit here to hear about Meg's experience at the National Museum of Natural History. So Meg, what more can you share about that?
It's such an amazing experience. All the different kinds of projects I've worked on as an exhibit developer, manager, and that role is a mouthful to say in terms of a title, but what it allows me to do is work with experts in their fields and just revel in all the knowledge that they have. And so typically we work in teams that develop exhibits together. So not only the curators, but you have exhibit designers, writers, developers like myself, and then educators as well. So you have people from different backgrounds really exploring the subject matter at hand. And I think the most well-connected project that I had to my archaeology days was I had the opportunity to work on the Life in Ancient Egypt exhibit at Natural History. And from back in the day, they had an exhibit about Western civilizations that was up for a very long time and needed to be retired. But there was a little bit of concern that we'd be taking our ancient Egyptian mummies off exhibit. And so we wanted to provide something. And so it was sort of two installments of the exhibit. We had a script for a few cases within that area of the gallery, and then we did additional script after that. But I got to work with Mindy Zader from Natural History, who was a faunal archaeologist, anthropologist. Oh, I forget. It's been a while. This is back in what, 2010, I think. But this really goes back to my my days as a kid of wanting to be an Egyptologist. So I was just totally geeking out the whole entire time. And so got my hands not literally on these mummies, but we had a couple of human mummies on display at that time. And so recontextualize the funerary practices within that to give context to visitors. And then the secondary portion of the show, we really looked at non-invasive ways of understanding the mummies that we had in the collection. And so we worked with a number of different anthropologists, archaeologists. Selima Ikram from Egypt was one of our guest curators. And so, when I watch PBS and she pops on, I'm like, hey, I know that person. We shared our opening party was around Halloween, so we all dressed up as something ancient tradition. So I was her mouse to her snake, and so a joint costume. It was great. Uh, and so, but just having these experts literally from across the world, Egypt, Sweden, in Washington, D.C., and I think the most amazing story from that whole entire project was the curators relaying to me the work they were doing with some CT scanning. And so Natural History has a CT scanner on site, which is fantastic. A lot of great non-invasive ways of finding out what's inside of a mummy and a plethora of animal mummies. So we were looking at a bundle that we all thought was going to be maybe a series of crocodiles. We had something that looked similar and wrapped in a similar way. Pop with the CT scanner, and as the image started coming up, the curators were taking a look. I said, "Oh, that's sort of weird. It doesn't have the same bone formation." And you see a series of tiny vertebrae all in a line going snaking around. It was a snake, but there were some long bones in there. What could that be? And I think it really hit home where I was working. They called up the shrew expert that happened to be working in natural history.
Wow.
And so they were bringing in these experts in rodents, and this gentleman looked and said, "Oh, I think that's a long-nosed shrew, but there's more to it because the nose wasn't as long as it should have been." And so we think that the snake had a shrew for lunch, but it wasn't immediate that the snake died and was mummified. So some of the digesting process had already started happening. So to get to that level of detail with all of these scientists huddled around a computer screen and just saying, oh crap, can you believe it's this? And now there's this whole entire story based off of one scan. I think only there I could have had that moment. It was fantastic. And so we try to apply that through the whole exhibit and really harness that passion of bringing everyone together to do this learning. And so I think that really that was just the best moments for me. And then I could also say that I also worked on the Hall of Human Origins. And working with all of the artifacts. And so my job at the time was I called myself an artifact wrangler. So there's about, I'm trying to think, 150 objects or so, many of which had to be replicas or reproductions based. With the skull of Cro-Magnon, there's only one. And it actually did come for the opening for 3 months to be in a special case in the exhibit. But, having something on display since it's a longer term exhibition. But going back to my interest in ceramics back at UW, I was I I would just go to different departments and pick up trays of material and start digging through and trying to manage all of it. I picked this little piece of pottery that was sort of darker and had some grit temper in it. And I was like, look, and I was looking at the tag and it said Jomon pottery. So it's like, wait a minute, you're telling me this Jomon era pottery from Japan. It's in my hands. And I get to not play with it necessarily, but it was in my care before it went up on the exhibit. And so it just looking at the fingerprints that were still indented on the clay before it was fired and just having that history literally right in front of me was amazing. And also with that project, uh, they had in the entryway, you're next to a silicone reproduction of Lucy, the early hominin. She's sort of hanging off of a tree by artist John Gurchie, amazing piece. And then in that area was also, it can be a little hard to see, but you see some footprints in the cement that was poured there. And it's a mold directly from Laetoli with early hominin footprints. And so when I was handed the mold to then give to the fabricators to make this floor, I'm like, you're kidding. This is directly from there. One of the first molds, and we're going to cast from this. Okay, cool. And the longer I look at it, there were two sets of adult footprints. And so one was walking, they're all in the same direction. One was by itself. And you look at the other set of adult footprints, you see some further indentations, and it was a child. And that child is walking in the other person's footprints. And so, how many times do we walk in the snow and we're sort of piggybacking off of someone else's, so not to get dirty? Maybe it looks like it was probably pretty muddy, depending, looking at the deposition around it. And, just to go back how many years, oh, they're just like us. Like there's this mental connection to a species so similar. It's just mind blowing. And to have the primary materials just sitting in our collections. And so those are the kinds of things that can happen. You don't, when you think about where your career can take you, I never in a million years, if you talked to me when I was an undergrad, that I would have that pop up for me. So that just goes to show, just see where life takes you, and it all come back around. It's amazing. So those are my little additional stories from the Smithsonian that just made my little archaeological heart so warm.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing.